All right, today I wanted to hop on to discuss the ever increasingly more popular sugar diet or honey diet or fruit till noon. And I'm going to give you an introduction to my understanding of the diet, how it works, or at least how it is claimed to work, the pros and cons of the diet, talking about it in a short-term versus long-term dietary intervention, and then go through who I believe it is right and wrong for. So my understanding of the sugar diet, and this is popularized through the work of Ray Peat, but popularized largely by Anabology on Twitter, at least to my knowledge. And there's one other woman who has recently gained some popularity, or I hadn't heard of her before. I honestly don't know her name, but she was on some big podcast. Mark Smelly Belly has been doing it recently. A bunch of people doing it. I have long been a proponent of a sugar diet. And I don't mean in the sense of the sugar diet, which is at least fruit till noon, basically all sugar all day, and then maybe one high protein, somewhat fat meal. And the idea, I think, partly behind this is avoiding the Randall cycle. So that is when substrates, being carbs, protein, or fat, compete with one another in the mitochondria to be burned. So you can any one cell can only be burning either protein, carbs, or fat at a given moment. They cannot be burning multiple or switching between the two. They don't do very well with that. And the issue with this extrapolation of the Randall cycle, to my understanding, is that because although one cell can only be burning one of those three fuels at any given moment, your body has millions of cells, and different tissues can be burning different things at a different time. For example, your muscles burn fat at rest and sugar, glucose, during exercise. Other tissues have a preference for running on different substrates as well. Muscles in generally tend to favor that, but organs in your brain use a lot of sugar, and so on. So although a given cell may only be able to use fat or carbs at any given moment, they can switch back and forth, and your body at any given moment is using all three and utilizing all three in respective quantities, which will obviously differ based on your nutrient status as far as how many carbs, protein, or fat you've eaten recently, and whether or not you're fasting. So whether or not your blood sugar is high, low, how long after the meal, and so on. And so the basis of the diet is eating sugar at least until noon. I think for most until dinner. You do like some kind of fast where you eat like breakfast and lunch and then you fast till dinner, but I don't know if I would qualify that as a fast. You come in and you eat a higher fat, higher protein meal to get your protein in through the day. And it is designed, to my knowledge at least, as a weight loss diet. So I've long been a proponent of sugar, not necessarily the sugar diet, but I think sugar is good for you in the right context. It is just fuel. It is largely energy void, which comes to the first major con of the sugar diet. There's not a lot of micronutrients in sugar, unless you count fruit and juice, which I think are counted in the diet. But the other con there is that they're super expensive. So if you're going to go for the cheap route, which is white table sugar, I guess Mexican Coke's not cheap, honey and maple syrup, they're really not nutrient dense. Maple syrup and honey, a little bit more so than white table sugar. But if you had 1,000 calories of each of them, you're probably not hitting your RDA. And anything for honey, if I had to guess, maybe a B vitamin or two. And then you probably will hit your molybdenum RDA. And I think one other thing that maple syrup is relatively high in, but nothing for table sugar. So they're pretty much devoid of micronutrients. And I see that as being a huge pitfall to this diet. If you do rely more so on juice and fruit, though, that can balance that out. Again, the diet does not include starches, and starches are very nutrient dense foods, and I think they're an important part of most people's diets. And so again, this makes it very expensive. It also makes it very low in satiety, again, unless you're eating a ton of fruit. But I have eaten a ton of fruit before. I don't find it very satiating. I think apples and certain fruit are, but I tend to be hungry within an hour thereafter. So you need to kind of be constantly eating fruit, at least what I find, and rather than having protein, carb, fat, starch, fiber, sugar, all in one meal, which keeps you going for a long time. I have recently implemented a cereal into my daily yogurt bowl. And that's been an absolute game changer because I used to, for the longest time, be ravenous after eating that within an hour or two. And this wasn't like, it was 2 servings of Greek yogurt, so 32 grams of protein. I had at one point 2 tablespoons of honey, so I think that's 42 grams of honey, 70 grams of blueberries, around 50 plus grams of strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, and at one point kiwi too. And I was constantly starving after. It wasn't until I added Raisin Bran or some other form of cereal, cornflakes, whatever, all healthy organic versions with clean ingredients, that I actually was like, oh, this is actually both really good from a texture perspective, but I'm not hungry 90 minutes later and like really hungry where I need to go eat. So maybe I could have used any other starch, or could have used an apple or something, which seems kind of whack in a yogurt. I also had marmalade too in it. So it was a big ton of calories from sugar, not very satiating. I was constantly hungry, which I think is another big potential con to the sugar diet. So some pros to the sugar diet is, obviously, I'm a huge fan of sugar, so it's very tasty. A lot of maple syrup, a lot of honey, a lot of fruit, a lot of juice, all of which I love. I think if I was only eating those, I don't know how much I would love them, and I would severely miss starch. I would miss bread. I would miss sourdough, which is bread. I would miss potatoes. I'd miss white rice. Those are the main ones that I eat. But even like I've been eating some pretzels and things recently. You know, I love starch. I think it's great. Even the cereal, my yogurt, I've been loving. It's made my yogurt so much more enjoyable. So if you are someone that doesn't enjoy those things, or you don't do well with starch though, this could be a little bit better for you. And it is pro-metabolic. And what I mean in that sense, again, it's based largely on the work of Ray Peat, but I think this is probably one of the most efficient ways to increase your metabolism in a short amount of time. And I do think that is partially because of what I mentioned earlier about the Randall effect, where if you had previously had displayed insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome, which is essentially like a traffic jam in your arteries, right, in your blood. So you have high blood glucose, high insulin, high free fatty acids, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, and all of that is jammed into your blood, not going anywhere efficiently. You're not really good at burning anything, and that includes protein, carbs, or fats. So I think that is a use case for this sort of diet, that if you wanted to rapidly switch from high fat to high carb, which again, I wouldn't recommend, but if you wanted to do that for whatever reason, you'd probably experience success with this, because you're essentially taking out any fat from your body or from your diet, which is going to hopefully put you in a more insulin sensitive position. We do know that post-workout, when you've depleted your body of sugar, and after breakfast, or not after breakfast, but first thing when you wake up in the morning, are typically your most insulin sensitive periods. So it's when you're depleted mostly of sugar. So if I was trying to increase my insulin sensitivity, which the sugar diet should do, because insulin sensitivity is essentially a measure of how well you burn sugar, this would probably be a good approach to it if I wanted to kind of just jam pack it. There are some other limitations to it though. I think a lot of people don't do well with sugar. I'm not one of them, but I cannot figure out for the life of me how to get my dad to tolerate sugar better. He just crashes consistently after he eats it. Might be sort of a reactive hypoglycemia. I've tried different B vitamins for him. And Kathleen is the same way, which makes me more so think that some people just do better with starch, or at least a combination of sugar and starch. I do better with both sugar and starch as well, but I really enjoy sugars and do really well with them. Starches also seem to work really great with me in conjunction with the sugars. So if you're someone that doesn't tolerate sugar well, this diet probably isn't for you. And I think could actually worsen digestive symptoms and things like that, especially if you already have bacterial overgrowth. And yeah, like if you, an important thing that I think comes with starches and other fibrous fruits is that you are feeding your microbiome a bit. And there is some possible evidence or thought that you could starve out any bad bacteria in your microbiome, but I think that it's probably not something you're going to be able to consistently do long term. And you see this with carnivores, where they have a low residue diet. So nothing should really be making it to the colon where your microbiome is housed. And over time, their gut health seems to get worse. It starts off a lot better, and then it kind of tanks over time. I've also heard that it's kind of horrible from the get-go, but I think there is sort of a overcoming phase where you have to get used to having zero fiber, and then you sort of get used to it, but it doesn't seem to last. And I think that's because you can't necessarily just kill off all the bacteria. And I do think some of it seems to be symbiotic with us in terms of helping us out in the long term. So who is it right for? I think it's really for people that just do really well with sugar, natural sugars, not like Starbursts and things like that, or a bunch of refined sugar. Again, you can have refined white table sugar, but not a ton of junk food because they come with artificial dyes, sweeteners, a bunch of other crap that is not allowed on this diet, which I think is a pro for the diet. And I think it's great for people that really struggle with keeping other foods down. So if you are someone that hasn't done well with, a lot of people do well with extreme diets or restrictive diets, I should say. And it's not because of the nature of the restrictive diet. Like, I don't think there's anything magical about the sugar diet. I don't think there's anything magical about keto, but it's really hard to buy anything from a vending machine if you are on a keto diet or on the sugar diet, because most of the things in vending machines have a bunch of crap in it, which are not allowed. Like, you're stuck with fruit, juice, maple syrup, honey, table sugar. Those could be, you can't find a lot of that stuff in a vending machine today, which is kind of sad. You would think that you'd be able to find a lot of alternatives or a lot of options in a vending machine for the sugar diet, or maybe even the keto diet, some beef jerky. But a lot of people, I think, experience success in these diets because of the reduction in choices. They've already made a decision before they have to go eat about what they eat. So they're not tempted to eat the donuts because they can't eat the donuts. They've already made that decision. There's no option for them. The decision's been made in advance. And that's why people do well with this sugar diet. I think they're self-selecting for people that maybe historically do not do well with the high carbs, and they enjoy it. They are changing up their diet enough that it doesn't resemble their old diet, so it's easier to stick to. Again, they only have a few options to eat with this diet, which again makes it easier to stick to. And adherence is the number one thing with diet success, in my opinion, how well you're able to stick with it. And I think an important thing, if you are considering doing this dietary intervention, is thinking about short-term versus long-term dietary intervention. So when we think about a lot of diets, we are considering them, I guess, in both a short-term and long-term dietary intervention. I think an analogy here would be like steroids. Most people I hope at least, do not plan to stay on steroids indefinitely. So they're cycling steroids. I don't really know much about steroids, but this is the analogy I thought of. And they're coming up with a plan to get on it and to get off of it. And that's how I think diets should be approached, because we want to spend 99.9% of our time, pretty much all of our life, basically in maintenance. Maybe you want to gain weight intentionally at some point, or you want to lose weight intentionally. So you go into a diet phase. But with these diets, the honey diet, the sugar diet, the carnivore diet, keto, they are projected more so as long-term dietary interventions, where it's like, this is the correct way to eat, and you're going to do it indefinitely. And I think that comes with a lot of pitfalls for a number of reasons. Like, you're almost guaranteed to get a micronutrient deficiency at some point on the sugar diet, maybe depending on like the rest of your day. With a lot of these diets, I would define a healthy diet as one that satisfies your micronutrient and energy requirements, and also allows you to fuel your own performance to the degree you want. So if you're ripping ass and your gut health is horrible, you're probably not a healthy diet for you in that context. I don't think any of these diets are going to provide that long term. I don't know if people will be able to stick to these diets long term. And most people that are hopping on this diet are not coming with an offboarding plan. Like, they're not doing it as like, let me do this for 6 weeks, lose some weight, and then I'm going to go back on it. Some people are, but like, so many people are just diet hopping from one thing to another, and they just want to try everything. And so, oh, this worked for me. This worked for me. Sure. But like, maybe you're just eating less. Are you tracking calories? How many variables are you controlling for? So that's what I think the issue is with so many of these diets. If you find that like this is something that works for you, or fruit till noon, and you're going to do it for 6 weeks, and then you're going to slowly phase back out of it, okay, fine. But the question to me there is, have you built the requisite skills to then go back to maintenance and keep the weight off? Because the goal is never to lose the weight. It is always to keep the weight off. And so many people confuse this. We just, end up in these constant cycles of gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight. And we never put in the time and effort necessary to master maintenance. And that is what I think is such a huge pitfall to all of these diets, that what we do with Transform is we say we have a 6-week period. This is not going to look like your normal life. It's going to kind of stink. You're not going to be eating out much. When you look at your day to day, like, it's not going to look normal. It shouldn't, because this is a 6-week temporary intervention to lose a ton of weight, or as much weight as you can, depending on the person, 10 to 20 pounds, 5 to 20 pounds, depending on your size, starting weight, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to phase you back up, reverse diet you back out to your new maintenance. Most diets never do this. They're just like, this is it. This is the keto diet. You don't need to cut calories. This is the sugar diet. You don't need to cut calories. And while that in some sense is possibly true for these, like, you are in a calorie deficit. I believe that is the only way to lose weight. You have to be burning more calories than you're losing. So maybe the sugar diet is ramping up your metabolism to the point such that even though you're eating more now than you were previously before the sugar diet, you are burning way more now because you are just burning all that metabolic fuel. Is this going to work for everyone? I don't know, especially if you have certain micronutrient insufficiencies or deficiencies, which the difference being clinical versus non-clinical. But if you do not get enough pantothine or B1, B2, any of the cofactors that are in the electron transport chain, the process of breaking down energy and turning, like glucose or fat, turning it into ATP, if you're lacking enough of any one of those, you will likely have issues with this bolus of energy, like 3,500 calories of sugar, without having a lot of the requisite micronutrients coming in to create those cofactors in the energy production cascade. So I think some people could do this too poorly with this. Some people also just don't do well with sugars, no matter what they are, fruit included, depending on the fruit, or they have to prepare their fruit a certain way. So this is something I'd be wary of. Maybe this is a good way to rapidly increase your sugar tolerance, and you'll just feel like crap for a few days. Your digestion will feel like crap, and then all of a sudden you'll feel great. Okay, by all means. But if you're going to do this, I really suggest making an onboarding and offboarding plan. I'm going to do this for X amount of weeks, try and lose this amount of weight, and then I'm going to slowly go back to my normal lifestyle, where I'm going to make sure that I'm maintaining this weight in order to keep it off. And maybe I'll adjust my calories, maybe I'll increase them, I'll decrease them proportionally to where I was based on how I'm changing my diet and the trend in which my weight is moving. Now, I do think the sugar diet's kind of cool because it is clearly a popularization of Ray's work. And this has taken me a long time to come to, but I think most people would be better off on a sugar diet compared to something like a keto or carnivore diet long term. Like, I would bet in terms of longevity, the vegan outlasts the carnivore, because I think the carnivore is going to be very deficient in a lot of nutrients that are only found in plants and fruit and tubers. You can get a lot of animal nutrients, quote unquote, not retinol, not vitamin E. You can. Vitamin D is a little bit hard to get, but like calcium, salts from sodium's from salt, thiamine, a lot of the vitamins and minerals we need, you find mostly in plants. The main sources of them in our diet, potassium, calcium, are from plants or dairy. So vegetarian would probably be way better than vegan. And I think there's a lot of detriments to carnivore. But one of the things I think is great about like a vegan diet, and you see that guy Dorian Ryder, who it eats like 5,000 gram all vegan and just eats a ridiculous amount of calories, is he is able to scale up his metabolism so high, which I've been able to do though, eating sugar, eating starches, eating fat, and eating protein. So I think this moderate approach and fiber. So eating this moderate approach that Kathleen Stewart has largely pioneered, or based off the work of Ray, which I think this work probably somewhat more closely resembles Ray's work, but you can decide that for yourself. They're all based off it, kind of going on in different directions. But to me, it's like, okay, today I had protein, Hitting my protein requirements, which is 0.82 grams per pound, is how I measure it for maximizing muscle growth. And in this phase of my life, the cut, minimizing fat loss or minimizing muscle loss. Hitting carbs, a lot of carbs, like almost 400 grams of carbs per day. That's actually C. And yeah, 396 grams of carbs, 395 grams of carbs per day, 36 grams of fat because I'm in a calorie deficit. Usually that would be close to double, and 162 grams of protein. And today, my major carb sources have been potatoes, I guess, orange juice, skim milk, sourdough, cereal, honey, apple, a little bit of cacao, maple syrup. So like these are really enjoyable foods that I find, but I'm also able to I'm having a steak tonight. I had some Greek yogurt. I had some coffee today. I had eggs this morning, which I really enjoy. I had some butter this morning. Very little butter. Most people wouldn't even count it. But I'm able to enjoy my life even while I've lost 20 pounds almost in the last 5 weeks and went through a bachelor party where I didn't eat any of these things. So I think this is a much more sustainable solution. And then I'm going to slowly reverse my calories back out, get my maintenance to a higher place, get my fat up to 60 plus grams, get my carbs hopefully back up to 700, 800 grams, keep my protein around where it is. It'll probably go up slightly. But like in terms of day-to-day life and being able to live a life normally, like I went to this bachelor party and I just kind of stocked up on Greek yogurt and I had some eggs in the morning, made sure I hit my protein, and then saved a lot of calories for night and some for beer. And I was able to stick to my diet essentially. Probably had way too many snacks, but you live and you learn. That's something I actually will reflect on maybe in a future podcast. But the sugar diet is like kind of insane to do anywhere else. Maybe it's not. Maybe you just load up on fruit all morning and afternoon. And that's, I guess, part of who will find success with this diet. Like, does it conform to your current lifestyle? That's why intermittent fasting, I think, is so easy for so many people, because it's very easy to abstain from eating unless you're really a breakfast person. But it's like, hey, let's get dinner instead. I haven't really been eating breakfast. Or maybe you just eat coffee, drink coffee, you grab a coffee. So most diets, I think, their success is based on how well it conforms to a given person's lifestyle, not necessarily on the diet, and also whether or not it creates a calorie deficit. Like so many diets, because they're so restrictive, just restrict foods that people previously could not restrict on their own, and therefore creates a calorie deficit incidentally. So for example, it wasn't the lack of carbs in keto, it's just that now you can't eat 4 cupcakes a day or 3 pounds of Coke or whatever that is, and you just blame the keto for your success in a positive way. And maybe it did have a net positive effect, but it might not be because of the ketosis. It's just because you cut out X food. There's 1,000 different factors that goes into all of these things. Like if I were to go to the sugar diet, okay, not only have I increased my sugar diet rampantly, not only does my breakfast and lunch look different, not only am I in my dinner, my digestion's going to change because I'm no longer eating starches or vegetables. I don't know how much more protein I will get. Probably get a lot less protein if I had to guess. It's going to be really hard to eat 160 grams of protein in one meal unless I have 2 tubs of Greek yogurt. Yeah. So there's a lot of different factors that go into changing this. The other major con that I see with this, and I actually talked to Kathleen about this yesterday, is the lack of mTOR upregulation. So mTOR, for anyone that doesn't know, is mammalian target of rapamycin, is essentially the protein that we need to turn on to increase muscle growth. Kathleen talked about this a lot, that upregulating mTOR through nutrition, i.e. getting amino acids into the bloodstream, which does turn on this gene, the mTOR gene, which then activates muscle protein synthesis. It doesn't seem to be that important in terms of building muscle, activating it through the nutrition pathway, because it only lasts for a few hours. Whereas when you lift weights, you turn on mTOR for 12 to 24, 36 hours. So it's on for a lot longer, which is part of the reason why people say not to hit the same muscle multiple days in a row. Complete tangent. I do think that the nutrition pathway for activating mTOR, so getting protein in your bloodstream every few hours, is actually likely very important in a calorie deficit for maintaining muscle mass. Because if you are not getting protein throughout the day, you are increasing the time window which you are burning more protein and therefore more likely to see muscle loss. Now, this is a mechanistic explanation. We would have to obviously have some randomized clinical trials like, okay, does a intermittent faster seem to lose fat? And it's the same thing, right? They're just protein fasting. So I guess this is the same thing as like protein sparing modified fast. Like, does the intermittent faster lose more, or the sugar diet, or I don't know exactly what protein sparing modified fast is, but do they tend to lose more muscle mass than the person that's eating protein more frequently throughout the day? Now, the argument there from the sugar diet people is that carbs tend to be protein sparing. And I do think that is true, but there's not a lot of data for that in healthy individuals. It's mostly based on people that are really sick. So if you have someone that's hospitalized, you feed them sugar, the rate at which they lose muscle will decrease significantly. Okay, great. For someone with more than an average amount of muscle mass, I don't know if we can extrapolate that data to it. And I would rather play the safe than sorry bet and continue to get protein in my bloodstream every few hours to prevent muscle loss and also continue to lift during that phase. So I would bet that, as we've seen with Peter Attia and other people who were doing longer term fasts, they tend to see a decrease in muscle mass over time, despite what some of the research RCTs are saying that it actually doesn't matter. If you extrapolate the data over a long enough time period, very small differences that might not even be measurable over a 6 to 8 week test, which is what almost all experiments are, maybe 12, may add up in the long term. And also, it's going to be very different, in my opinion, for someone that doesn't have a lot of muscle mass versus someone that does have more muscle mass. Like, I would really bet that a pro bodybuilder that doesn't eat any fruit or any protein all day is going to lose more muscle mass in a diet than their counterpart who is getting consistent feedings. Both in consistent feedings, like just getting sugar throughout the day, which I do think helps, more so than not getting anything at all, but also getting protein. So what I would actually rank is, I would bet intermittent fasters who don't eat anything for 8 hours or 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, lose the most muscle mass. The fruit till noon or the high sugar diet people lose the second most muscle mass, probably a pretty big disparity. But the people that have carbs, protein, fat, fiber, me, the Kathleen, Ashley, Sarah, the transformers, if you will, I think Kitty and Craig do the same thing. A lot of the pro-metabolic people, I would guess we lose the least amount of muscle mass in a calorie deficit compared to fat mass. And I think we've clearly demonstrated with Transform, and at least myself, that you can successfully lose a lot of weight with both carbs and fat and protein. I think the sugar diet and the keto diet, those can also lose a lot of weight. And maybe there is something a little bit special to these dietary approaches. But again, I really think it's coming down to fitting the user the best, like whose diet or lifestyle best conforms to utilize this. And maybe it's also like a right place, right time sort of thing. When someone goes from keto to vegan or vice versa to pro-metabolic, some of these people just feel so much better because in part they created a problem in their old extreme diet that they are now solving with their new extreme diet. And obviously I don't think like pro-metabolic is an extreme diet, but maybe I will at some point in the future. But when you go from like not having any animal fats to having a ton of animal fats, you might feel a lot better because of the saturated fat and the vitamins you were missing. But then you create a vitamin C deficiency or other B vitamin deficiencies with carnivore. Then you go pro-metabolic and now you feel really good, but you are really crappy at burning carbs. So then you go on the sugar diet and you starve your body of fat, forcing your body to become really good at burning carbs. Forcing your body to become really good at burning carbs very quickly. And then the cycle goes on and on. So at the end of the day, like the verdict here, in my opinion, is if you can do the sugar diet indefinitely and you feel great on it, by all means. And if that's what you want to do, who am I to tell you otherwise? Great. If you feel good on it, you like how it fits your lifestyle, go for it. I would advise you to make sure you're hitting your micronutrients, and I would advise you to make sure you're hitting your protein. But other than that, I think it is a solid dietary choice. It just might be a little bit more expensive, and it's probably not going to work for everyone, but really no diet is. So, perceive, think, act, in the words of Ray Pete, and figure out what works best for you. Till next time, guys, be good.